Hello everyone, I got 5 jokes for you today. One snowy Sunday morning, a pastor struggled through a harsh blizzard to reach the rural church he was assigned to. He knew the weather was terrible, but he was determined to make it on time. After fighting against the wind and the snow, he finally arrived at the church with just 5 minutes to spare. He walked in, shivering and covered in snow, turned on the lights and looked around the empty church. There was not a single soul in sight. Disheartened, the pastor began to think that perhaps he should just turn everything off and head back home. Just as he was about to do so, the door creaked open and an old farmer named Bill walked in, also covered in snow. The pastor greeted him. "Oh, hello Bill. It seems like nobody else could make it through this storm." With a sigh, the pastor continued, "I guess we won't be having a service today." The old farmer looked at him for a few moments before saying, "Well, Reverend, I know I'm just an old farmer, but let me share something with you. If I take a load of hay out to the field to feed my cattle, and only one cow shows up, I still make sure that cow gets fed." The pastor, feeling embarrassed, nodded and said, "You're right, Bill. I shouldn't let the weather dictate our worship. I'll go get ready." Motivated by the farmer's faith and dedication, the pastor not only went ahead with the service, but also delivered a passionate sermon that lasted a full 2 hours. He was so inspired that he couldn't help but pour his heart and soul into his message. When the service finally concluded, the pastor walked over to the farmer and asked, "So Bill, I hope you enjoyed today's sermon." The old farmer looked at him, shook his head, and said, "Reverend, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but let me remind you of something. If I go out to feed the cattle, and only one cow shows up, I still feed it. But I sure don't give it the whole frickin' load." A wealthy multimillionaire living in Australia decided to throw an extravagant party and invited all of his friends and neighbors. Among the invitees was Brian, the only native Australian in the neighborhood. The party was held around the pool in the lavish backyard of the millionaire's mansion. Guests were enjoying themselves, sipping cocktails, dancing to the music, feasting on prawns and oysters grilled on the barbecue, and engaging in flirtatious conversations. As the party was in full swing, the multimillionaire decided to up the stakes for some excitement. He gathered everyone's attention and announced, "In my pool, I have a 15-foot man-eating crocodile. I'll give $1 million to anyone brave enough to jump in and join him." No sooner had the words left his mouth, when there was a sudden, loud splash. Everyone turned to see Brian in the pool, wrestling ferociously with the crocodile. He jabbed its eyes with his thumbs, threw punches, headbutted it, and even managed to get it into chokeholds. He bit its tail and flipped it through the air with the skill of a martial arts master. The water churned and splashed as the battle raged on. Both Brian and the crocodile screamed and thrashed about, creating a chaotic scene. Finally, after an intense struggle, Brian managed to strangle the crocodile, and it floated lifelessly to the top of the pool. A completely drained Brian climbed out of the pool, while everyone stared at him in shock and awe. The multimillionaire approached him and said, "Well, Brian, it looks like I owe you $1 million. To everyone's surprise, Brian replied, "Nah, mate, it's alright. I don't want it." The multimillionaire, feeling indebted, insisted, "I have to give you something. You won the bet. How about $500,000? Brian shook his head and said, "No thanks, I don't want that either." Growing increasingly baffled, the rich man persisted, "Come on, I have to give you something for that incredible feat. What about a brand new Porsche, a Rolex, and some stock options?" Once again, Brian declined the offer. At his wit's end, the multimillionaire asked, "Well, Brian, what on earth do you want then?" Brian, with a determined expression, replied, "I want the bloody bastard who pushed me in." A pregnant woman unexpectedly falls into a coma while giving birth. The medical team works tirelessly to ensure her safety and that of her unborn child. Months later, the woman finally awakens from her coma and realizes that her pregnancy belly is no longer there. She notices a doctor standing next to her bed, smiling warmly. "Hello," says the doctor, "you have been in a coma for 6 months, but don't worry. You are in good health, and we will be releasing you from the hospital soon." Feeling a wave of anxiety, she asks him, "Doctor, what happened to my baby?" "Don't worry," the doctor reassures her. "The birth went very smoothly, and your babies are alive and thriving." "Babies?" the woman exclaims. "What do you mean, babies?" The doctor explains, "You gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. They're both doing great." Overwhelmed with joy, the woman asks, "That's wonderful news. Where are they? Can I see them?" The doctor tells her, "Your brother has been taking care of them since they were born. He's been doing an excellent job." "My brother?" she says, concerned. "Oh no, he's such an idiot. What on earth did he name them?" The doctor tries to calm her down and says, "He named the girl Denise." The woman breathes a sigh of relief and replies, "That's actually a very pretty name. I can live with that. So, what did he name the boy?" The doctor hesitates for a moment before responding, "Well, he named the boy Nephew." An eccentric philosophy professor, known for his unorthodox teaching methods, decided to give his students a unique one-question final exam after a semester covering a wide variety of topics. On the day of the exam, the students arrived, took their seats, and prepared themselves for whatever challenge the professor had in store. To their surprise, the professor picked up his chair, placed it on his desk, and wrote on the blackboard, "Using everything we have learned this semester, prove that this chair does not exist." The students immediately began writing furiously. Fingers raced across pages, erasers rubbed up mistakes, and notebooks quickly filled up with elaborate arguments and theories. Some students wrote more than 30 pages in just 1 hour, trying their best to disprove the existence of the chair. However, one student in the class confidently stood up and finished the exam in less than a minute. His classmates looked at him in disbelief, wondering how he could have possibly completed the task so quickly. Weeks later, when the grades were finally posted, the rest of the class was astounded to see that the quick-thinking student had received an A. They couldn't fathom how he managed to achieve such a high grade when he had barely written anything at all. Curiosity piqued, they approached the student to find out what he had written. It turned out that his answer consisted of just 2 words, "What chair?" A young, dedicated nun who worked for a local home healthcare agency was out making her rounds to visit patients one day when her car suddenly ran out of gas. As luck would have it, there was a gas station just a block away from where she had stopped. She decided to walk to the station to borrow a canister with which she could fill up some gas and bring it back to her car. Upon reaching the station, she asked the attendant for a gas canister, but he regretfully informed her that the only one they had was already lent out. However, he assured her that it would be returned soon if she didn't mind waiting. The nun, conscious of her patient waiting for her, decided that she couldn't afford to wait and made her way back to her car. As she rummaged through the vehicle looking for something that could hold gas, she came across a bedpan that she was taking to the patient. Being resourceful and practical, she decided to use the bedpan as a makeshift container. She carried the bedpan back to the gas station, filled it up with gasoline, and then cautiously carried it back to her car. As she carefully poured the gas from the bedpan into the fuel tank, 2 men across the street were observing her actions with curiosity and amusement. One of the men turned to the other, with an incredulous expression on his face, and said, "You know, I've heard that the Lord turned water into wine, but if that car starts, I'm going to church every Sunday for the rest of my life."